Hello friends, welcome back to Cosmopolitan Cornbread. My name is Constance, and today I thought I would bring you out here on a beautiful fall day and talk about canning. Home canning is a wonderful way to put up wholesome, nutritious foods for your family, to fill up your pantry and know exactly what every ingredient is. The smell of simmering jam, the crunch of homemade pickles, and just the satisfaction of having all of those jars, beautiful jars, lining your pantry. There's little that beats it, but there are some common mistakes that canners make that can turn all of your hard work into waste. So today we're going to look at the top mistakes that home canners make. We're going to talk about why they're a mistake and how you can avoid making them. I am going to cover everything that you need to know so that you can with confidence. So whether you are brand new to canning or you're just brushing up on your skills, after we go through all of these common mistakes, you'll understand the why of the canning process. You'll understand the why of each step so that you can protect all of your hard work and ensure that your family has nutritious, wholesome food in the pantry that they can enjoy all year long. All right, now this video is also going to be available in article form on my website so that you can refer back to it at any time. There's also a free PDF of this as a guide that you can print out and maybe stick it in your canning cookbooks and just have it on hand to refresh yourself, especially if you haven't canned in a while or if you're brand new to canning. So we're going to go through these. Number one, not inspecting your jars. So first things first, before you even begin canning, the first thing you should do is inspect the jars that you're going to be canning with. Look over the jars, look for any cracks. Even the tiniest one can be a problem. Little nicks in the edges. Run your finger around the rim of the jar. Feel for any flaws, and it may be damaged or it could just be a manufacturing flaw. Using damaged or defective jars can compromise your canning success and safety. So why is this a problem? So first, you have risk of breakage. The heat and pressure during the process, especially if you are pressure canning, can put stress on the glass, and any small crack or chip could potentially cause the jar to shatter, potentially ruining your food and creating a dangerous mess. And then you have seal failure. If there's a little chip or flaw in the rim of that jar, it can prevent the lid from sealing properly, which could lead to wasted food, spoilage on the shelf, and simply failure to seal. So, best practice is always inspect the jars carefully before use. If you see any cracks, chips, or even deep scratches, don't use it for canning. Save it for just storing dry goods in the pantry. Always be sure to use undamaged jars to ensure safe, shelf-stable home canned goods. I do this before I get started canning when I wash the jars, whether they are brand new jars out of the package or jars that had been previously used, washed, and then put away. I always start off with clean everything. So as I'm washing those jars, I inspect each one and look for any kind of flaws. And I do this before every canning session. Next, not following the right canning method. Hot water bath or steam canning versus pressure canning. Using the right canning method for processing your food is absolutely essential for safe home food preservation. The method you choose depends on the acidity of the food that you're canning, and using the wrong one can make your food unsafe to eat. High acid foods can be safely hot water bath canned, also known as the boiling water method, or processed in a steam canner. Foods like most fruits, pickles, jams, jellies, and tomato products are high in acid with a pH below 4.6. These foods can be safely processed in the hot water bath or steam canner at 212 degrees, which is the temperature of boiling water below 1,000-foot elevation. Low acid foods must be pressure canned. Foods like meats, vegetables, beans, and soups are low in acid, which is a pH above 4.6. These can harbor Clostridium botulinum, the bacteria that causes botulism. Pressure canning reaches 240 to 250 degrees, much higher temperature than just the water bath or hot or steam canner. It's hot enough to kill botulism spores, which live in low acid, anaerobic, which means oxygen-free environments. On the other hand, pressure canning delicate, high acid foods can overcook them and ruin their texture or flavor. So you want to make sure that you know which type of process to use for whatever food it is that you are preserving. Now, there is a way to process low acid foods in a hot water bath canner. The Amish are known for doing this. However, it requires that canner to be at a non-stop rolling boil for hours and hours while maintaining the proper water level. And if you have ever had a boiling pot of water that's gone too long, you know it evaporates and it just goes down and down and down. Even if there is a lid on, you're losing steam, you're losing water. So if you have a pot boiling for hours to process it, a low acid food in a hot water bath canner instead of a pressure canner, you've got to maintain that water level somehow. If the water boils down and evaporates and you add additional water, and when you add that additional water, it stops boiling, you have to start the process all over again. This is incredibly difficult to do, and because of that, it is not considered safe. So I say, please don't try it. It's not worth losing all of that food that you are trying to put up. Botulism risk is real. Botulism produces potent toxins in low acid anaerobic environments, like we mentioned, and it is odorless, it is colorless, it can be life-threatening, and you have no way of knowing if it lives in your kitchen environment. And while yes, it is a very rare thing that happens, botulism does not get contracted very often. It does seem to be a little bit on the uptick though, because there are a lot of canners out there who are doing things a little bit risky, but that is not a risk that I am willing to take when it comes to my family's health. So, best practice. The right canning method isn't about preference, it is about safety. Always use pressure canning for low acid foods and hot water bath or steam canner canning for high acid foods to keep your home canned goods safe, shelf stable, and delicious. Number 3, not following tested canning recipes. Tweaking ingredients, changing quantities, or using old unverified recipes when canning can be dangerous because canning relies on precise chemical and physical processes to prevent botulism and other foodborne illnesses. Here's a detailed breakdown. Acid balance is critical. Changing ingredients such as adding extra vegetables or dairy can lower the acidity and make a recipe unsafe for the original processing method or processing time. As I stated previously, acidity plays a key role in whether a food can be processed in a hot water bath canner or a steam canner, or if they have to be processed in a pressure canner. The processing time depends on the quantity and size. Canning recipes are carefully tested based upon the jar's size, the density of the food, and the amount of liquid that is in it. This is why when you can something like sweet potatoes, you can pack the jars with the cubed potatoes, but they say to never mash or puree them because it's going to completely change the density of what's inside that jar. Increasing or decreasing quantities or using larger or smaller jars than the recipe specifies can prevent proper heat penetration, leaving bacteria alive. By the way, this is why so-called dry canning is very dangerous. It is a method that I see very popular nowadays in the Rebel Canning groups on Facebook. But canning cubed potatoes without water might give you a nice texture, but the liquid in the jars is what conducts heat throughout the jar and throughout the contents. But with dry potatoes with no liquid in there, the proper temperature to kill the botulism spores isn't reached. If you have ever stuck your hand in an oven that's 350 degrees, you can do that and withstand it. But try sticking your hand into a 212 degree pot of boiling water. That 212 degrees of boiling water is going to severely burn and cause tremendous harm to your hand. Whereas sticking your hand into a dry oven, 350, 450 degrees, yes, it's hot, but you're not going to do instant damage to your hand. There's a huge difference between dry heat and wet heat and how it conducts. Old or verified recipes may be unsafe. Food science is something that is continually studied, and research provides new information over time, and that's no different with canning. Your great-grandma's old canning recipes may not actually be as safe as one might think. They don't account for modern food safety standards or proper acidity levels. Yes, grandma may have done it that way and maybe no one got sick, but is that a risk you really want to take? And additionally, a lot of times the tomatoes grandma canned and the tomatoes we can today, they have different acidity levels. A lot of newer versions of tomatoes have lower acidity. They've been bred for that. But all that to say, in my opinion, when you know better, you do better. Don't risk it. Temperature precision matters. Pressure and boiling water temperatures must reach a specific threshold for a precise duration of time. Tweaking ingredients or quantities can change how the heat distributes through the jar, again risking under-processing. You want the foods in your pantry that you spent hours of your time and energy canning, maybe even weeks and months growing from seed, to be a benefit, to provide healthy, wholesome foods that will nourish your family. So, best practice. Always use tested, trusted canning recipes from reputable sources. The National Center for Home Food Preservation is a good resource, as well as the Ball Blue Book, canning book. Never improvise with ingredients or quantities or processing times unless you fully understand the food science behind. Mistake number 4, ignoring the Headspace guidance. Headspace is one of the most important details in canning. It's the gap between the top of your food or the liquid and the rim of the jar. It might seem like a minor thing, but it has a huge impact on food safety, sealing, and quality. First, it allows for expansion during the processing. When jars are heated in a water bath, steam canner, or pressure canner, the food and the liquid expand inside that jar. Too little headspace and the contents inside the jar can bubble up and overflow during processing, which can cause messy jars and prevent the lids from properly sealing. Proper headspace gives the food in the jars room to expand safely and keep it from touching the lids. It ensures a proper vacuum seal. The headspace in the jar helps create a vacuum as jars cool because the heat will force air out of the jar while it is processing. Then, as the jar cools, that space contracts and pulls the lid down tight. It is what causes that beautiful tink or ping sound, which we see as the sound of success. Too little headspace and the vacuum may not form, and then the lid may not seal. Too much headspace and the jar may not create enough suction, and then you risk spoilage because your jars didn't seal properly. It prevents spoilage. Correct headspace ensures the right amount of air is left in the jar. If you have too much air, it increases the risk of mold, discoloration, or bacterial growth. If you have too little air, it can cause the contents to overflow or under processing, making the food unsafe. It maintains texture and appearance. Proper headspace prevents foods from overcooking or becoming mushy. Not to mention the jars will look beautiful and the food appetizing. This is important not only for your own family, remember we eat with our eyes first, but also if you're giving them as gifts or storing them long term. I personally love to gift people home canned goods, especially jellies and jams and things like that. So you want them to look good. Best practice, follow the recipe's exact headspace measurement, usually around 1/4 inch for jams and jellies, and 1/2 inch for pickles, 1 inch for pressure canned foods. Use a ruler or a headspace tool to check before you seal the jars, but always check to see exactly what it says in the recipe that you're using. Mistake number 5, not removing air bubbles. So when you're canning at home, removing air bubbles is a small step that makes a big difference. Those little pockets of trapped air can cause all sorts of problems, from uneven heating inside the jar to failed seals once your jars cool. If the air isn't released, your headspace can change, causing all of the issues that we previously mentioned. It can cause food or liquid from seeping out during the processing. Even worse, air pockets can keep your food from reaching a safe temperature, putting your hard work and your family's safety at risk. By simply running a bubble wand, a plastic knife, or even a chopstick, which is what I like to use, gently around the inside of that jar before sealing, you can help ensure that even heat distribution, a strong vacuum seal, and beautifully preserved food that lasts on the shelf. It is one of those tiny steps that makes all the difference in successful canning. So, best practice, after filling your canning jars, gently run a bubble remover tool down into the jar, jiggling a little bit to work out any bubbles, and add additional liquid or contents to restore the headspace if you need to, because those air pockets take up space and your headspace may have changed once you remove the bubbles. Mistake number 6, failing to wipe the jar rims. When canning, never skip wiping down your jar rims. Even a tiny bit of food or syrup on the rim can keep your lids from sealing properly, and that means failed seals, which means spoiled food. Wiping the rims ensures a smooth surface for an airtight seal and safe, shelf-stable food every time. Best practice, before adding your lids, always use a clean, damp cloth dipped in white vinegar, especially for meats or other greasy foods, to wipe each rim. Number 7, reusing lids. Most canning lids are designed for one-time use. The sealing compound softens and molds to the jar rim during processing, creating a perfect vacuum seal as the jar cools. Once that compound has been used, it is a bit degraded and probably won't properly form the same tight seal again. If you reuse old lids, you risk seal failures, air leaks, and spoilage, even if everything else was done correctly. Reused lids may also have dents or warping that prevent them from sealing at all. There are lids that are specifically made to be reused, such as the Tatler's reusable brand of canning lids or the glass lids of a Weck jar, but most canning lids that are commonly used are designed to be single use. Now, I will say that during COVID, I did do a little bit of experimenting because I personally was struggling finding canning lids, and I did reuse some lids after examining that sealing compound. I looked for the ones that looked in the best condition, and I did can some food with reused one-time use lids, but I would not recommend doing that unless it's an absolute emergency. But then really, if it is an emergency, do you want to risk your food getting spoiled because the jars didn't seal? So the best practice is always starting with brand new lids so that you ensure a strong vacuum seal, safe preservation, and peace of mind that your hard work won't go to waste. Mistake number 8, incorrect processing time or pressure. Processing time is one of the most important parts of safe home canning. It is what makes your food truly preserved and safe to eat. The processing time ensures that the heat has enough time to kill harmful bacteria, molds, and enzymes that could cause spoilage or foodborne illness like botulism. It also allows the food to reach the right temperature all the way through the jar. If jars are underprocessed, microorganisms could survive, leading to unsafe food or jars that will spoil on the shelf, which, as I previously stated, completely undermines the whole reason for canning wholesome, delicious foods for your family. On the other hand, overprocessing can cause food to lose quality and become too soft, dark, or mushy. Following processing times from a tested and reliable recipe ensures that your food is both safe and delicious with the right texture and shelf life. Elevation or altitude adjustments. The elevation of where you live or are canning, because not everybody cans at home, plays a role with how you will process your foods. As elevation increases, air pressure decreases, which means water boils at a lower temperature. So for example, at sea level, water boils at 212 degrees, but at 3,000 feet, it boils closer to 206 degrees. The lower boiling point means your jars won't get as hot during processing, and that can leave dangerous bacteria alive in the food. So to make sure your food is safely preserved, you must adjust your processing time or your pressure based upon your elevation or altitude, as some people call it. Water bath canning or steam canning, you would increase the processing time. With the pressure canning, you will increase the pressure. I have an article that provides a little bit more information about that on my website. I will put a link to that in the video description down below. But always check the instruction manual for your pressure canner to give you guidance on that, and also check your recipe. So, best practices: following the elevation or altitude adjustments in tested canning recipes ensures that your jars reach the temperature needed to kill harmful microorganisms and create a safe, airtight seal. And as you can imagine, it is very important to know the elevation of where you live. There are websites where you can put in your address, pinpoint your location, and it'll tell you exactly what your elevation is. And there are often apps that you can find as well for that. Mistake number 9, not venting the pressure canner. Venting a pressure canner is extremely important and ensures that your food heats evenly and reaches the temperature needed for safe preservation. When you first heat a pressure canner, the inside of it is mixed with steam and trapped air. And if you skip venting, that air stays inside and the air doesn't transfer heat as efficiently as steam does, which we mentioned earlier. This means that the temperature inside that canner might be lower than what your gauge is actually indicating, and your food might not get hot enough to destroy the bacteria. By venting it for 10 minutes before closing the vent and pressurizing the pressure canner, you allow a steady flow of pure steam to fill that chamber. So while your pressure canner is heating up, you want to watch that vent and wait for a steady stream of steam just pouring out the top. Once you see that, set your timer for 10 minutes. It pushes out all of the air and ensures that the correct temperature is reached and maintained for the entire processing time. So, best practice: let the steam vent for 10 minutes before closing the vent, putting your weight on, and building pressure inside the canner. This ensures that air is purged and the correct temperature is reached for safe processing. Mistake number 10, letting jars sit in the canner too long after processing. Letting jars sit in the canner too long after processing can cause both safety and quality problems. First, overcooking the food. The jar stays hot in the residual heat of the canner, which can continue cooking the food inside. This can lead to quality loss, mushy textures, faded colors, and loss of flavor or nutrients. Who wants to eat mushy, tasteless food? No, thank you. Lid sealing problems. Extended time in the hot canner can create excess steam between the lid and the jar, potentially affecting the vacuum seal. In some cases, the jar's lids may seal too slowly and form a weak seal. Then you go into the pantry later on only to discover something that you had there on the shelf had a seal that had come loose, and that food is no good. Stressing the glass. The jars remain exposed to high temperatures longer than necessary, which can put stress on the glass and increase the risk of cracks and damage to your jars. Jars are an investment. You want them to last a lifetime, so why not take the best care of them that you can? So, best practice: after processing, wait the appropriate amount of time, then remove the jars. Leaving them too long can cause siphoning or overcooked food. For a hot water bath canner, when the timer goes off, you remove the lid, you wait 5 minutes, then you remove your jars from the canner. For a steam canner, you turn off the heat, you wait 5 minutes, then you remove the lid and remove the jars. For a pressure canner, once you're able to remove the lid, you wait 10 minutes and then you remove the jars. Mistake number 11, improper cooling. So cooling jars after canning is just as important as the processing itself, but it's a step where many beginners make mistakes that can compromise safety or ruin their food. Here's the most common ones. Jostling or tilting the jars. When your jars come out of the canner, they haven't sealed yet. The contents are hot, but the vacuum inside the jar has not yet formed until you hear that beautiful ping or tink sound, and the jars are completely cooled. I've seen people lift jars out of the canner and there's water on top, so they take the jar and they tilt it to pour that water off. But the reason that is a problem is because, again, your seal has not yet formed. There can be space between the lid and the jar, and by tilting it, you're potentially risking liquids from seeping in there. And then the lids might not seal properly. Remember, We cleaned the rims of those jars with the vinegar and the cloth to get it nice and clean so it wouldn't hinder that jar from sealing. But when you tilt it, you might be allowing food to get right back in there. Any water that is on top of those jars when you take them out of the canner is probably just going to evaporate as they're sitting there cooling on your counter, so just leave them be. Placing jars on a cold or wet surface. Setting hot jars directly down on your cold countertop or other surface can cause thermal shock, which could cause the jars to crack or even burst. Always insulate the surface that you are setting your hot jars on with a couple layers of dry kitchen towels, a cooling rack, a wood surface, or a canning mat. I have a video on how to sew your own very simple canning mat. You can make any size to fit your countertop perfectly. I'll put a link in the video description down below or up here in a card. Additionally, you always want your jars to cool in a draft-free location, again, to prevent thermal shock. If you've got a whole bunch of really hot jars that came out of the canner, and then all of a sudden there's a cold draft that comes through, you could get thermal shock and again, have problems. You want to make sure they're in a spot where they're not going to be disturbed. And it's also advised to try to avoid direct sunlight if you can. Not allowing enough cooling time. Removing the lids or testing the seals too soon can ruin the seal. Jars typically need 12 to 24 hours to fully cool and set. Moving jars before they're fully cooled can compromise the seal and shorten the shelf life. Best practices: let jars sit upright and undisturbed on a towel or rack, insulated surface, away from drafts or direct sunlight for 12 to 24 hours. Mistake number 12, not checking seals. Not checking the seals on your jars after canning is one of the worst mistakes a home canner can make because you just spent all this time and energy making and preparing and processing home canned goods. So take the time for some quality control checks and make sure it was successful. A proper seal helps keep your food safe, shelf stable, and free from bacteria. Always test the lids after they have been fully cooled. The lids, when you press on the lids, they should be firm, they should be concave, sunken down in, and they should not move. Checking the seals ensures that your hard work stays safe and delicious for months to come. If you find a jar that has not sealed, immediately place it in your refrigerator to use it right away. So, best practice: after the jars have cooled for 12 to 24 hours, press the center of each lid. It should be concave, curved downward, not moving or popping, and then gently remove the ring. Lift the jar by the edge of the lid to confirm that it is firmly sealed. I even give it a nice firm tug just to make sure. Mistake 13, storing the jars with the rings on. Now this is one of those things that is hotly contested. A lot of people store their home canned goods with the rings on the jars, but it's completely unnecessary. Storing home canned goods with the rings or the screw bands still on the jars might seem convenient, but it can actually lead to spoilage or hidden seal failures and rust. When the rings are left on, they can hold a loose lid in place, making it look like the jar is sealed when it isn't. Removing the ring lets you easily spot any jars that have lost their seal on your pantry shelf. Detecting failed seals. When the rings are left on, they can hold a loose lid in place, making it look like it's sealed when it isn't. Removing the ring lets you easily spot any jars that have lost their seal. There's also been instances where jars have resealed themselves just from changes in barometric pressure from the weather. So by not having a ring on there, when a lid pops, that seal breaks, it loosens and it's not going to allow that lid to like seal back down and create a false seal. Preventing rust and corrosion. Residue from processing or humidity in storage can cause the rings to rust or stick to the lids, making them difficult to remove later and shortening their lifespan. Cleaner storage. Jars without rings stay cleaner and are easier to inspect. Plus, you can reuse the rings right away, and you don't need to purchase anywhere near as many, which is going to save you money. Best practice: once jars are completely cooled and you've checked that each lid is sealed tight, remove the rings. Wash the rings and put them away so you can use them in your next canning session. Mistake number 14, not washing your filled jars. Washing your jars after canning before storing them in the pantry is an important final step that helps keep your preserved foods safe, clean, and long-lasting. It removes any sticky residue, any food fragrances. During processing, some juices or syrup can siphon from the jars, and sometimes even if they are properly sealed. This residue can leave your jars sticky, smelling like food, attracting dust, pests, or even mold while they're in storage. Gross. This is a lesson I learned the hard way back when I was a brand new canner many years ago. The very first time I processed home canned carrots. Those jars got sticky, the lids got rusty, and it was just gross. So I learned that very quick. I learned not to keep the rings on. I learned to wash the jars. Food residue left on the lids and bands can cause rusting or unpleasant smells over time, especially if you live in a humid climate like I do here in the South. So washing your jars keeps your pantry tidy. Best practice, once the jars have fully cooled and sealed, remove the rings, wash the jars in warm soapy water, rinse them well, and dry them thoroughly. And finally, mistake number 15, skipping labeling. Never skip labeling your home canned foods. A simple label with the contents and date help you stay organized, help you rotate your stock, and avoid confusion or spoilage. It's an easy step that keeps your pantry safe, efficient, and beautiful. Skipping labeling might seem harmless, but in home canning, it is a big mistake that can lead to confusion, waste, and even safety issues. First, you'll want to know what's inside. So many canned goods can look alike once they are on your pantry shelf. Is it apple butter or is it barbecue sauce? Who can tell? Tracking the date. Proper labeling with the date of canning helps you rotate your stock and use the oldest jars first. This ensures that you're eating your preserved foods while they are still at their best quality and you don't find jars that were missed and are wasted. It's recommended that home canned foods are best used within a year of canning. After that, they may still be edible, but they're going to begin losing flavor and color and texture. And over time, their safety can begin to come into question. Identify recipes or variations. If you make different versions, like say regular dill pickles or spicy dill pickles, a label helps you remember which batch was which. So, best practice, write the contents and the date and the recipe and batch, if you need to, on the lid or label before storing your jars. A simple piece of masking tape makes a great and very inexpensive label. You can also write directly on the lids with a permanent marker if you like. So that right there is the 15 most common mistakes that home canners make, why these can be a mistake, and how to avoid them. So, canning is both an art and a science, and every detail matters when it comes to safety and success. It doesn't have to be scary, but by understanding and avoiding all of these common mistakes, you'll protect your hard work and you'll preserve your harvest with confidence. So now you have the knowledge to fill your pantry with wholesome, nourishing foods that you can truly trust and feed your family with joy. So that is it for today, friends. I know this was a very lengthy video, but I spent a lot of time working on this, and I just wanted to share more information for all of the new canners out there, or maybe people who haven't done it in a long time, just to kind of refresh their memory and explain the why behind a lot of the rules of safe canning. So if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments down below. And again, you can get this entire thing in article form on my website, and there is a free PDF of this that you can print out. So that is it for today, friends. Thank you for joining me here again at the homestead. God bless, and I'll talk to y'all next time.